from the Bravehearts. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Bravehearts right now. So Bravehearts M.O.V.E. New York is an authentically led youth nonprofit organization. The Bravehearts provide services through an authentic and innovative partnership with the Children's Village, the official organizational mentor for the youth-led agency. Jessica and Jasmine from the Bravehearts also work in partnership with a multitude of county, state, and national jurisdictions, such as the Department of Corrections, Family Court, and the Department of Social Services to provide authentic youth voice to develop responsive and healing services and systems. And for our conference this year, we really want to center the youth voice. And so really excited to be hosting this workshop. And we also want to begin this conference by showing you a 9-minute video, which features several young people who participated in a program called Act for Change. The conference centers the voice of youth, the young people like the ones in the video, as we want to hear about some of their concerns, experiences, and hopes and aspirations, and the action that they hope to take and to create a livable future for them. After the video, I'll let Jessica and Jasmine from the Bravehearts introduce themselves and continue with their presentation. So let me just get the video up for you.
This is a coordinated activity happening across this nation. And so we are in a state of emergency. Black people are dying in a state of emergency. We cannot look at this as an isolated incident.
Sorry, everyone. I guess we're having a little bit of technical video with it, difficulty with the video, just trying to have a little buffering speed. I'm going to give it a minute and see if it catches up. All right, so I think I'll just continue. I'm sorry for that, and I'll see if I can play it at the end of the workshop, but I guess you got a taste of, you know, what we're aiming for, what some of the youth voices, you know, this project was really exciting for us, and so we were really looking forward to sharing it with you. The other thing that I can tell you about the Act for Change is that there's a workshop tomorrow, which is the youth and the leaders for that group are actually presenting their own workshop. So if you are interested in finding out more, you can do so that way. And at this time, I really want to ask that Jasmine and Jessica sort of introduce themselves. And we'll get started with the Bravehearts component of this workshop.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susie. And I hope you can see me now.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. And I also apologize as well that folks could not see the video. Myself and Jasmine had a chance to view it yesterday, and it was just really touching and really impactful. And hopefully the themes of the video, Bravehearts can do some justice to and uplifting today in our session. So it's an honor to share space with you all this afternoon. My name is Jessica Grimm. I have two roles. I have the privilege and honor of serving as the director of Braveheart Services at the Children's Village. And I also am the executive director of Bravehearts M.O.V.E. New York, Inc. as a nonprofit organization. And I'm going to be explaining a little bit more in our presentation of what it looks like to be an authentically youth-led organization working in partnership with a volunteer agency in New York State, and the complexities, challenges, and rewards around that dynamic. I come to this work as a survivor and experiencer of the child welfare and mental health system myself. So I'm very passionate about the causes and concerns that impact young people, because I myself had challenges with articulating my voices and my causes and concerns when I was navigating youth serving systems. And so it took the awareness and the understanding of how important and essential our voices are, and our ability to speak up for not only ourselves, but for the things our peers are going through, because who knows better of what young people need than young people who have gone without. So I'm hoping that we can share a little bit of the Bravehearts experience and journey over the past 8 years, what type of work we've been able to do across the state and across the country, and be able to hear from you all about your successes and challenges around incorporating youth voice within your agencies and communities. And now I have the outstanding pleasure of introducing a young lady who is very near and dear to my heart, Miss Jasmine Green. And I'll let Jasmine introduce herself, but I'm going to kind of put a sidebar out there. This is Jasmine's very first time doing a formal and virtual training, learning exchange in midst of the pandemic. But Jasmine comes with a wealth of experience, knowledge, and compassion. I've had the pleasure to work alongside her for several years now, and I'm just so happy to be able to see that leadership dynamic trickle down, because we're really in the business and in the works of building the leaders of tomorrow. And when I first met Jasmine 6 years ago, I always knew that she was a leader. And so it's an honor to be able to give her a platform and watch her grow and be able to share her voices of experience. So Jasmine, who are you?
That's a great question. First off, thank you for that lovely introduction. I appreciate you so much. I'm Jasmine Green. I have been in Bravehearts, Rockland Bravehearts, for the past four years, since it's been 4 or 5 years. How many years it's been?
Almost 5.
Because I have not been keeping track. So yeah. So like I said, like she said, I do come from a very experienced background who wants to make a change, who wants to motivate people to have their voices heard, to want to, you know, feel safe in a place where they can have stability and things like that. I've also have been approved of becoming a mentor next month, so I'm very happy about that. I'm I'm so sorry. I'm a little nervous.
You are so good. You are so good. And we have a lot to share. So, I mean, I think that it's great that the room just knows who you are and why you want to advocate and why being a Braveheart is important to you. And we're going to share more of that and hear more from you throughout the workshop. So try not to be nervous, but that's kind of hard because I think all people in this space having to speak on something so important, it's a little nerve-wracking. So Susie, with that said, I think we're ready to kind of kick it off and get things started.
Yeah. You can see your presentation now?
I can. Do I have the ability to change the slides or would I need to ask you?
You would need to ask me, unfortunately, unless you're able to share your screen now, which you should
Yeah,
have
no,
the
and
ability to.
after those tech issues, I'm not touching a thing on this
All
computer.
right. All right, just let me know. Give me the word and I'll go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susie. Okay, so everyone, welcome to Brave Change. We are hoping to take you on a journey of commitment, compassion, courage, and change when it comes to operating within the child welfare system and youth serving systems on a whole, because I think we all know coming into this work that no young person is siloed in their experience. We may be working to uplift and support young people in the mental health system, but they may be connected to the special education system. Maybe they're a survivor of domestic violence. Maybe they're navigating homelessness. So young people's story and experiences don't always nicely fit in a cookie cutter mold. And this is really a collaborative approach to healing and hope. And so we hope to bring about that today and talk about tools, challenges, and successes when it comes to authentically engaging young people. Susie, you can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. I'm just going to have to move this over so I can see the screen here. And also your guys' beautiful faces. So we're hoping today to really have a conversation with you. Well, first and foremost, we want to provide a safe space for you to learn about the importance of youth voice across New York State and across different sectors of those child youth serving systems that I had just mentioned. We hope that you will have the ability to learn about various components of youth advocacy and how youth voice and lived experience can be woven into your organization. We hope that you'll be able to leave this learning exchange with a better understanding of how to sustain youth-adult partnerships. We're also hoping to provide you with some tools and strategies to help you troubleshoot some of those challenges that come up when trying to establish and maintain those youth-adult partnerships. And then we want to touch briefly on the idea of what it looks like to have equitable best practices when employing and supporting youth advocates within your organization. Okay, we're good. Okay, so in order to do that, what we would like to do is have some accords with the room. And so I know that the pandemic has pushed us all in this road show that is virtual learning and meetings. And these conversations are really best had in person where we can feel body language and feel comfortable. But because we're in this virtual space, we want to make sure that we try to bring as much of that comfortability and that safe space dynamic as we can. So at Braveheart motivational meetings in the community, we have something called accords. So oftentimes when there's programming, there's usually rules, and young people are not fan of the word rules, and language does matter. So when we're working collaboratively with young people, we want to make sure that we leave the door open to negotiate even just the expectations of the space that we're in. And that's called an accord. So an accord is a mutual agreement. And so at Braveheart meetings, we have these accords that, we just have to go back to the former slide. I'm sorry, Susie. Thank you so much. We have these accords that help to govern our movement, our meeting space, and make sure that we keep it a safe space for all young people. So we wanted to have accords for this learning exchange today with you all. And so the first accord that we came up with is the right to sacred space. So we want folks in this room today to feel comfortable to represent their most authentic self. And because we're in this virtual space, you can do that by unmuting yourself and speaking up. This is not meant to be a lecture style type of dialogue. This is very much a learning exchange, and we love to have the cross conversation. So if you're feeling something and you want to share something, please feel free to do so. If you're more comfortable with typing out your thoughts and feelings, please utilize that chat box. You know, people really also thrive off of validation and feedback. So there's a bunch of emojis that Zoom has. If you're agreeing with something, put that thumbs up or that clapping symbol, or that heart emoji if something really, you know, struck a chord with you. So we just want this space to be as comforting as possible as if we were in person together. The next accord is take space, make space. So this is more indicative to working with young people, but anytime you're in a group setting, you have some folks that are very talkative and like to participate, and then some folks that maybe need a little bit of support and encouragement to speak up on how they feel about the subject at hand. So we just invite you to consider the idea around, if you've had the ability to share throughout the conversation, to make sure that you're making space for your fellow peers to also share their thoughts and concerns. We also invite you to consider the notion around taking your own inventory. When talking about youth-adult partnerships and youth voice and youth advocacy, sometimes the terminology, sometimes the concepts and the theories can be very thought-provoking and really challenge the mind on what our biases are, what our threshold is for sharing power. And oftentimes there are experiences where adults in the room can even experience a bit of uncomfort with some of these theories that we're really challenging you with. So we want you to feel comfortable in this space and know that we are not talking about a single system, a single agency, a single community. We want you to understand that these are just collaborative thoughts of young people who have advocated for the causes and concerns of young people for over a decade. So we want you to feel comfortable that there is no finger pointing or blaming here. This is just shared experiences of credible messengers and youth advocates across the state. We invite you, in order to take in that information in a healing way, to be adaptive-minded and open-hearted. So just to be flexible with rethinking what is the norms and being really creative of thinking outside the box. And last but not least, your presence is the present. So these virtual spaces are sometimes uncomfortable, right? Because when we're in physical spaces, we're really able to feel the room, get a sense of what's working, what's not working. But in this virtual space, your participation is the best present to us. So just again, you know, utilize that chat, unmute yourself, feel free to jump in and share your thoughts. And that's what will really make this conversation really meaningful. Susie, we're good. So let's talk about what brings us all together, right? We all came into this conference and these workshops and this learning experience because we want to make sure that we're absorbing best practices and we're around a cohort of change agents, people who are really rallying around youth and families and how to improve access to services within the community. All of us have, you know, names and our job titles and our agencies that we come from. And while that identity part of us is important, it's also exciting to really know who's in the room and what brings us together. So I want to invite folks to kind of utilize that chat feature right now. And I'm going to ask 3 questions. So rather than the norm of going around the room and saying your name and your agency and your county or community, Susie, if you can go to the next screen, please. I would love for you all to answer 3 questions. Who am I? What do I stand for? And what do I stand against? So I want you to really think very creatively and really, you know, individually. There's no right or wrong answers here. Just who am I? And that could be your actual name, or it could be something deeper. And what do I stand for in this work? And what do I stand against? So I'll share, it's just like to give an example. And then we'll read a couple of responses in that chat box. So who am I? First and foremost, I'm a healer and I'm a survivor. What do I stand for? I stand for opportunities and access for young people who are disenfranchised. I stand against oppression.
Can I also share instead of typing?
Jasmine, you better.
Who am I? I am a survivor. I'm strong. What do I stand for? I stand for stability. I stand for success. And so much more. The list goes on, but I'm gonna keep it short. But I stand against bullying. I stand against racism. I stand against, and the list goes on and on and on. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jazz. And we have some people chiming in, so let's capture a couple of responses. So Tara writes in, Tara, hey Tara, I am becoming.
Wow, I like that.
Snaps for that. I am becoming. Tara stands for the practice of radical forgiveness. Love that. I stand against not holding myself and others accountable. Always count on Tara to bring in the meaningful and the heavy thoughts. Thank you so much, Tara. Very powerful. Lala says, I am a mother, an activist, a caretaker of all who I touch. Whew. Very powerful. I stand for change and hope and joy. Melissa says, I am strong. I stand for respect towards youth. I stand against abuse. Thank you so much for sharing. And bear with me, I apologize, this chat box is tiny. Melanie says, I am a vivacious, overactive educator. Yes, yes. I stand for equity and accountability and personal responsibility leading to collective action to make the world a better place. All of that, yes. I stand against injustice and all the isms. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Paulina just wrote in the chat, I am Paulina Pride. I am a radical rebel. Yes. I stand for equity, justice, and non-conformity. I cannot say this word, conformity. Thank you for sharing. I stand against homophobia, transphobia, racism, all kinds of hate, and I stand against conforming to the system. Very, very brave words, Paulina. Thank you so much for sharing. And let's get folks to keep writing in.
Can I just say something really quickly?
Please.
That with everybody who participated and wrote what they stand for and things like that, very powerful, like it's oh wait, we have some more coming in.
Yes, we do. No, and then we'll highlight a couple others and then we're gonna just move on just for time's sake. But Jasmine, you're totally right. And that's why this activity is really meaningful, because sometimes we enter these virtual spaces and we don't know who folks are, but we have more in common than we think. And you're seeing some reoccurring themes, right? We're seeing a lot of people who stand against the isms, against racism, against oppression, people that stand for healing, for radical action, for change. So there's a common thread that brings us all together, and we see that through an activity like this. Let's close it up with David. David, thank you so much for sharing. I am a social worker. David's a social worker. He stands for organizing communities and serving families. And you stand against patriarchy and racism. Thank you for uplifting that. Really appreciate that. And so we're going to do as best a job as we can, really referencing the chat. So please feel free to chime in and continue to share your thoughts on anything that we share. We want to keep this as interactive as possible, but we also want to get through the material as well. And we're going to try to do that as best as we can, because a lot to cover. But Susie, I think we're good to go to the next slide. Thank you guys again for sharing. So we're really going to talk about, today the history of youth voice, and where it's come from, where it's currently at, where it's going, and all the threads and dynamics of that when it comes to various levels of the system. When you look at some of the, we strategically pick these images because they are very thought-provoking. When you look at the image to your left, you see historical constructs of child oppression, children that were experienced orphan trains that had immigrated to this country, which is really how the child welfare system in itself came to be and to start. We see the images of young people and experiencing homelessness, fear, institutionalization, labeling, confinement. And so you can look at the 1800s, you can look at the 2000s, and some of those themes are still very much in play today. And there's a lot of work to be done and accomplished when it comes to truly and meaningfully absorbing youth voice into program, practice, and policy. Susie, we're good? I feel like I should have like a keyword like salami or something. We'll have to do that next time. So youth voice, right? Youth rights are a major aspect of how youth are viewed and treated in society. How many people in this room were raised or grew up with their grandparents or their parents, or maybe their great-grandparents who had the saying of children should be seen and not heard? So when we talk about youth voice and the lack thereof, this is a societal challenge. This is the notion around adultism, around the fact that our society is woven and created in a way that youth voices, children's voices, are not on an equitable playing field as adult voices when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to change, when it comes to their very life. So this is really a social justice cause and concern when it comes to the collective voices of young people. And when you look at youth voice in various institutions and within various sectors, it all looks very different. It's not cookie cutter. There's no one approach that is the right approach. And there's levels to it. There's everything from manipulation and tokenism to youth-led and organically youth designs. And so we're going to cover those different aspects and what that looks like. And we're hoping that some of these things you feel like you can relate to, or you maybe have experienced, or maybe these are things that you have personally advocated for and against. Susie, we're good. So in order to talk about where we want to go, we really need to know where we came from. And when you talk about peer support and youth advocacy and youth voice, all these pillars and these domains of opportunities for young people to express their experiences, we really got to give some kudos to the mental health system, because it really was the mental health system that pioneered peer support, family support, community advocacy. And so when you look at, for folks in the room that are coming from the mental health field, and then maybe folks in the room that are coming from the child welfare or the justice field, you see that the mental health realm is a little bit far ahead when it comes to approaches and dynamics around family and peer support, because that's really where it started from. If you do some history, you'll see that it was actually a psychiatric hospital in France in the mid-18th century. There was a lead psychiatrist in a psychiatric hospital who, his name was Jean-Baptiste Poussin. And he was one of the first documented individuals who really brought up this idea of the importance of peer support. And what he did was he had current and former psychiatric patients come back to the hospital and work with the current clients at the hospital, because he said that there was something very unique about the approach and the engagement between someone who has survived and experienced same things as their peers. And also just stated that an individual who has experienced trauma, an individual who has experienced adverse situations is almost averse to cruelty. There's a unique compassion and humanity and a willingness to really change and rally around the spirit of an individual because of their lived experiences. So you'll see in the mental health system a lot of peer support programs that really just it's a required treatment need. I'm sure there's folks in the room that have experienced going to treatment plans or service plan reviews, and people in the meeting, the adults in the room will say, well, where's the parent partner, or where's the youth advocate? You know, where's the family organizer? So we really have gotten to a really great place where we don't even move ahead with treatment unless we're making sure that we have the voices of youth and family in the room. And because of those efforts, there's been a lot of evidence base that have been built around peer support programming, not only in New York State, but around the country and globally. And this is a real social justice movement, and it's led to the mobilization of the family movement. You know, there was absolutely a point in time where families did not even have say over the treatment of what their children were experiencing. And same can be said for young people. And that's how the youth movement was born, because as families had to fight for rights and equal power sharing over their children and their loved ones that were receiving treatment, young people too needed their own autonomous space to be able to talk about the causes and concerns that directly impact youth and youth culture and youth identity. And thus the youth movement was born. Susie, we're good. So some of the pros and cons of like when youth voice is involved into system decision-making versus when it's not. So when youth voice is involved, youth are able to develop advocacy and leadership skills, and most importantly, resilience skills. You know, we are role modeling to young people every day when we're working with them that relationships can be rewired and trust can be rebuilt. Programs and positions are designed to be more meaningful, more equitable, and more responsive because we have the expertise of young people who have experienced those services firsthand at the table. And adults become more informed on youth culture, causes, concerns, ideas. There's something very invigorating about being an administrator in a room and working with a group of young people. Not only is it a fresh set of eyes, but it comes with a lot of humor, a lot of very real talk, a lot of blunt ideas, and it really can reinvigorate the work. But then when we look at when youth voice is not involved, some of those really detrimental challenges, right? So grievances that young people experience, some of those pitfalls, those disservices, those really oppressive and negative interactions, they go unaddressed, which is just a lost opportunity to be able to teach and really redesign policy and current practice. Program outcomes are not as meaningful and as effective as they should be because we are providing something to youth without getting youth input. And then systems remain stagnant, and then more so are siloed, which is just not only a challenge to us as professionals who are trying to help a young person, but when you have a whole bunch of different systems doing different things and they're not talking to each other, it can become quite like a circus and become very distracting and not very helpful. Susie, we're good. So Bravehearts, how does Bravehearts come into play? Why were we asked to even present on this? You know, we were given an opportunity to have that voice 8 years ago. We were given an opportunity to talk about the causes and concerns that impacted young people in Westchester County. So in 2013, myself and 6 other young people came together. And at that time, we were hyper-focused on coming up with solutions for youth homelessness and how we can avoid young people from becoming housing insecure while transitioning out of the child welfare system. But we very quickly realized that we wanted to do more than just provide some recommendations to the system. We wanted to name ourselves. We wanted to have some autonomy, some decision making. We wanted to really raise the glass ceiling on what is possible for young people to do. We all know there's focus groups and panels and workshops and conferences and trainings, and there's many different modalities where you can have youth voice shine. But what does it look like to create a mechanism, or i.e. a movement, where youth voice is sustained? It's building different leaders. It's really challenging the status quo, and it's creating meaningful programs with responsive outcomes. And so we were just able to work in order to do that, we had to build partnerships. So the Bravehearts is the first authentically youth-led non-for-profit organization in New York State that supports young people coming out of the child welfare and juvenile justice and mental health systems. So in a nutshell, that looks like literally young people make all the decisions from top to bottom. So the board of directors is comprised of young people with lived experience. All of our programs are the direct idea of a Braveheart who's come to a motivational meeting and said, this is a system problem and we need to fix it because young people are failing because of this barrier. And that is how we create our programming, which we call system impact programming, because we truly feel like the young people who have experienced family court, the young people who have had to sit in DSS offices, the young people who have had to worry about their reunification or their permanency options or their treatment options, that those are the voices that are really spearheading the programs that are being created. Because it's kind of silly, right, to think about the notion of a bunch of adults in the room creating programs when they've never had to experience that program. And it's not about an either or. Should it be administrators? Should it be young people? We feel like the sweet spot is in the partnership. There is an expertise that we know young people have that we feel needs to be honored and supported by adults. And there is an expertise that adults have that we feel needs to be honored and supported by young people. And so when you look in our logo over there on the right, you see our mission is within the eyes of our lion. We picked a lion because collectively we are stronger. Our voices are more powerful and more meaningful because there is a group of us, a cohort of us. When you are by yourself navigating a system and you're speaking up, oftentimes it can be scary, intimidating. Sometimes you're not heard. But when you have a gathering, a family to really back you up and say, I've experienced that too. I know what that pain feels like too. That's very powerful. It's very healing. So our mission is to improve the youth serving systems, most particularly the child welfare system across New York State. And inside the other eye, you'll see an adult holding hands with a child, because in order to do that, we know that adults and youth have to work in partnership and have to share power in order to create new possibilities. Susie, we're good. Okay, awesome. So now we're going to talk about what youth voice looks like in the child welfare system, and what we've been able to accomplish, what we see, what are some of the common themes, and we're going to get some of your input along the way as well. Susie, we're good. So when you talk about youth advocacy, right, there's so much terminology out there. There's terminology that's specific to the mental health system, terminology that's specific to the child welfare system. And so sometimes these themes and these words get thrown around, they get used in different spaces. So we wanted to take some time to really put some language, some concrete language to some of these themes that we see within these youth serving systems. So let's just talk about different types of youth advocates that are out there. So Youth Move National, who is one of our parent organizations nationally, they are a group of young professionals who support localized youth movements across the country. And so Bravehearts M.O.V.E. New York is the statewide chapter for New York State. And they help to come up with these ideologies around different forms of an advocate role that a young person can take on. So when you hear the word youth advocate, it's defined as a young person who's typically between the ages of 15 to 25. There's no hard and fast rule with that. It's just what we normally see, who's able to utilize their lived experiences to help motivate and inspire another young person, to help role model some of that hope and some of that resilience that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So that's an individual that's just really beginning to learn how to speak up, beginning to digest and really negotiate with what's important to them, and really beginning to have these conversations with other peers in their community, to really build some familiarity and some cohesion around these challenges. But then there's a graduated level, right? So you get from a space as, okay, I have my experience, I have my story, I want to share it with other young people, I want to share it with other professionals. But now what happens when you kind of get tired of sharing that story, or you feel uncomfortable with sharing the things that you went through 5, 10, 15 years ago? You never age out of your experience, but you want to shift the way your narrative is and how you're sharing your experience. So if you're starting to entertain those questions, you may be delving into the next realm, which is the advocate for youth. And so that's the young adult who we see is typically between the ages of 25 and 35, who's gone from the youth advocate role and now is interested in advocating for youth and their experiences on systemic issues. So for example, an advocate for youth, let's say we're talking about early parenting, teen pregnancy, right? I myself, when I was in the child welfare system, became a young mom early while I was still in the system. So if I wanted to talk to another young mom about the experiences that you take on when being a young parent, I'm just talking about the fact that I was a young mom. I'm talking to that young person about the challenges with maybe family court, the challenges with navigating pediatrician and sleepless nights and all of those things. And we're connecting on that one-on-one experience. But if I'm operating as an advocate for youth, I'm going beyond talking about all the moments of being a young mom. And now I'm talking about how it affects young people as a whole. So rather than just talking to that one young person about being a young mom, now I'm talking about the propensity that young people are getting pregnant earlier and earlier, and what it looks like for the child welfare system to support young parents, what it looks like for reunification, what the family court system looks like when engaging with young moms who maybe have a petition against them or they are filing a petition. So now I'm taking this experience, this singular experience I had, and I'm identifying and connecting it with systemic issues. And so that's that advocate for youth. And that's really where we see a mobilization on like really that system advocacy, folks that are really ready to tackle policy development and programming change. And then the final stage is that young professional stage. And that's the emerging adult who's able to take their years of advocacy experience and solidify a career path within a youth serving field of work. So that could be anything from the young person who was an advocate for 5 to 10 years. They've told their story. They've rallied up in Albany for legislative change. And now they're interested in serving an administrative role. So now they're working at a nonprofit that still helps young people, but they're administrative assistant, or maybe they work in human resources. So they're able to really fill a need, but do it in a way that solidifies what their career is. And they don't have to feel that they have to be wear that young person hat for a long period of time. You can go to the next slide. And if at any point anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or utilize that chat box. So now that we talked about some different examples of youth advocacy, now let's talk about some of the pillars of peer support. What do support programs look like when working with and for young people? So you can have everything, an agency can have peer delivered services, which would look like consulting. This would look like this, a workshop or a presentation that is youth led and youth focused. Or you could have peer-run services, which is maybe an agency that supports support groups for young people. Maybe they're hosting a rally or an awareness event in their community. Maybe it's an agency that has decided to put together a youth advisory board. So it's an ability for young people to actually run and design those services. Then you have peer partnerships. So that's when young people are coming together with administrators, with adults, and they're designing trainings. They're providing technical assistance to systems and to agencies on best practices with youth. They're doing mentoring or leadership programming. And then you have finally peer employees. And that goes to the point that I had just mentioned about what it looks like for young professionals to really find their way into their career path and their professional niche as they're adults. And we really invite organizations to really think very creatively about how you can integrate youth voice or young professionals into various levels of your organization. So what does it look like for, Jessica to not just be the person who has to tell her life story all the time, but I still have my experience, but now I'm an administrator of human resources at my agency. So now that unique skill set gives me a really nice way to engage with other young people who are either at the agency or who are coming into the agency to provide work. So I never lose that skill set. It's lived experience is almost like a pair of glasses that you wear. It gives you a very unique way to see the world and see things in which they operate outside of just the confines of a box. So those are just some examples of ways that you can provide programming for young people with young people. Next slide, please. Awesome. And so it's building off of that, when an organization is really ready to work with young people, they want to be able to concretely define what is the purpose area? What am I trying to achieve when working with young people? So, for an example, doing a workshop like this, an agency would want to be able to say, okay, we want young people to speak, but what's the point of that? What are we hoping to get from our participants by having young people speak? What are the next steps after this young person has spoke? And those are some of the things that you want to think about to help you to identify your purpose area. And so some purpose areas are recreation and peer networking. So that can be an agency that takes on recreational opportunities for young people or exposing them to other peers within their community. So they're building some camaraderie. It's also really, really great to have young people see things outside their immediate worldview. So they realize that the things that they're going through, other young people are going through as well. Or maybe your purpose area is community involvement and advocacy. And maybe it's really important for your organization to have community events. Maybe Mental Health Awareness Month and Foster Care Awareness Month is coming up, and you want to do something for the community. That would be that purpose area that you would fall into. Or social marketing and awareness. So maybe the agency is looking at taking on youth voice in order to spread messaging. So maybe that looks like young people that are writing a newsletter or managing a blog for the organization. Youth voice development and leadership. So that looks like an organization that is willing to take on leadership training for their staff members, really raising the bar on what youth voice can shift, that cultural shift within an organization. And that requires intentionality. It requires really creative supervisory support, but it's something that really brings about sustainable change. Because if you can shift a policy or practice in the organization, no matter what young people you have to take the helm of that change, it will always be there as time and years go on. Excuse me. Then you have personal development and empowerment. This is a really special one because this looks like an agency really taking on an investment into their youth staff, not just professionally, but personally. So everybody that works with young people with lived experience knows that there is a level of relational engagement that really should be met in a really meaningful way. If you are hiring young people with lived experience, they're more than just their, darkest and and most challenging moments. Oftentimes, these are young people that are still navigating very difficult experiences while they are trying to support other young people in the community. So taking an agency, taking on that personal development is really looking at supporting the advocate within their current role, but also helping them up that career ladder and helping them with that personal development so they can obtain and sustain ongoing career and professional supports as an adult. And then finally, you have peer service delivery, which looks a really great example of that is the strides that we've made in New York to really get Medicaid reimbursement for family and peer support. And so that's that very specific either mentoring or resource navigation support in the community. It's very concrete, it's very structured, and it's sustainable. It's also sometimes funding contingent, but you can be very creative with how you leverage dollars and leverage resources in order to obtain this. Next slide, please. So we're going to get into something called a courageous conversation, and I'm hoping folks will jump back in the chat room as well. And what I would like to hear from you all is we have a question that we want to really pose to the room. What are your thoughts? When you think of youth voice being woven into your programs and organization, what's the goal that you're trying to accomplish? You know, maybe you have a contract and you have a budget line to get youth voice at the table, but outside of a budget narrative, what's the goal? Why is it important to you? Why is it important to your agency to have youth voice at the table? And what are you hoping your agency is going to be able to do in a more meaningful way as a result of including youth voices? So big question, but I would love to hear from some folks in the room of really just, you know, thinking about youth voice, youth engagement. What's the goal? What's the goal? And Jasmine, while folks are waiting, you know, I think we have folks typing and thinking really about this heavy question. Is there anything that you wanted to share so far?
Well, first off, I want to share, because I didn't really exactly share my experience with Bravehearts and the time that I have been in it and how it has helped me emotionally, physically, mentally. So I guess I could share that with them while they're typing. And, you know, I was gonna say it at first, but I think I was too nervous, but now I'm a little bit more comfortable. But since I have been in Bravehearts, it has put me in because I come from a very toxic family. And I am only 22 years old, so I've been in foster care for years, pretty much all my life. They have not been successful at all. So being, you know, the type of person who would move, you know, place, and was never stable in one place and was so used to change, it has, you know, kind of put up a wall and put up pretty much I didn't trust anybody. And I don't know, for those of you, I guess, who know what the foster care system is, if you guys don't, it's very, you know, I don't want to say it in a bad way, but it is kind of in a bad way, but it can be good. But some people just don't have good experiences. And that can cause them to not trust anyone, to not feel stable and things like that. So when I was joined into Bravehearts, it has taught me to trust the people that I was sharing my experiences with. It wasn't like, you know, if I was able to share it, it was like, you know, I regret telling them, or, you know, regrets, you know, sharing my deepest um, thoughts and stuff like that. I felt safe. Like I felt like it was right. Like I felt comfortable, you know. So it helped me in that way. Um, and it helped me be, you know, speak up more. I was always the type of person that, you know, would just let things slide and things like that. And now nothing gets past me. um, so I have made, and honestly, I don't even see the group as a group. I see it as a family. Um, you know, we come together, you know, we cry, laugh, you know, it's everything, you know, like a family. But it's like you feel safe, you know. I have made some great relationships with the people that have been in Bravehearts. And I think one of the other things is that a lot of them also look up to me. Um, and that's like amazing because they're like around my age. So it's like the fact that, you know, young people that's, you know, a little bit younger than me look up to me, it's like heartwarming. Like it's amazing. And that's what makes me want to even share and, you know, become a mentor, become, you know, someone that can, you know, make a change, because that's something that I want to do. Um, yeah, so.
No, you did great, Jasmine. And that's that you what you're really talking about as well, like one of the themes that I'm hearing, and we're going to talk about this in a couple of slides, is the sense of belonging. And I think that that's something that the child welfare system, just by virtue, when you're coming into the child welfare system, belonging has been broken. Your sense of belonging, your sense of family, your sense of attachment, your trust in adults, somewhere along the line that's been broken. It's been breached. And so I think the Bravehearts absolutely provides a space where there's a level of belonging. And it's in every young person. You know, we define a Braveheart as any young person who's gone through difficulty or adversity in their life, and they come through that a stronger and wiser version of themselves. They are a Braveheart. So Jasmine, you shouldn't, you know, be surprised that people look up to you.
Another thing is it's like an emotional getaway. You know, personally for me, when I miss group every week, you know, or not every week, but if I do miss it, I get emotionally stressed out because I see that, you know, the group and everything like that, Bravehearts as a emotional getaway, you know. So it's also, you know, an emotional getaway from everything, you know, it's like a relief.
No, well said, Jasmine. Thank you so much for that. And I know you're going to offer a lot of really good tips throughout the presentation. Thank you for being brave enough and sharing that perspective. I'm just going to capture a couple of thoughts here in the chat before we move on, because I do see we have about 30 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get through as much of the content as possible. But in the spirit of, you know, young people talking about these things, we always go over time, and it's hard to manage time. So I apologize in advance if we're moving a little quickly. But I want to thank folks for participating in the first courageous conversation. Melanie shares that she'd like to assure that youth interests and program relevance to youth needs are represented. Also, youth ideas carry equal weight to adult ideas and are often more creative. Yeah, you know, it's a fresh set of eyes. It's something new. It's something invigorating, and it can be exciting to the just mundane and everyday practice of this work. David, I see you would like to share verbally, and that's fine with me. So we'll see if we can get you unmuted so you can respond. Susie shares, for me, intentionally engaging youth voice can lead to more impactful, relevant, and effective programming. Absolutely. And Jasmine, you're getting a whole bunch of accolades for people thanking you for your words. So you're spot on there, girl. Susie, can we, how does unmuting work? If somebody wants to share, do they have the capacity to unmute themselves?
Yes, they do.
I think I just did, Jessica.
I
Can you
think
hear
you
me?
did, David. I can hear you.
Thank you. What a great speaking voice you have.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks to Jasmine for sharing that story and helping to destigmatize the experience of being in the child welfare system. Really appreciate that. My question is, as a board member, we have long had a need to have a youth voice on the board. And I think the purpose of having the youth voice on the board is to help us take a look at our programs and see how relevant they are to youth. And my question, I guess, around that is, do you provide any kind of services? We're in Orange County, but do you help to locate youth that might be interested in serving on boards?
We do. That's a great question, David, and thank you so much for asking. So yes, so we actually have, I didn't get into like kind of the programs of Bravehearts, but we have a Bravehearts in Orange County. So we operate in Newburgh. We also do some side motivational meetings in Middletown because we also understand that Orange County has a severe challenge around access to transportation for youth. Oftentimes there's services, but young people and families cannot get to them because of how spread out the county is. So we do operate in Newburgh, and we do provide mentoring and motivational meetings, which would look like your support groups for young people. But we also, what it sounds like what you're talking about is more of that support to help not only identify a young person who can sit on the board or some young people, because we also think it's best practice for young people to at least work in pairs. So this way they have a peer that they can bounce off ideas or concerns with and don't feel singled out and siloed within that role. We also provide technical assistance and trainings to agencies to help them to get really meaningful youth engagement efforts. And we're actually in the process of doing that right now with OCFS. We are training all 72 volunteer agencies, residential agencies across the state, on equitable and meaningful practices when working with young people within the agency. So I will absolutely share some more of that at the end. I want to just try to get some of this content to you all because we do have limited time to get together. But if you want to put your contact information in the chat, I'm more than happy to also share and build with you offline. And then hopefully I can add on what at the end of the presentation, some of those like concrete strategies to maybe help that Bravehearts could maybe help your youth voice component in your advisory board. But yes and yes.
Will do. And if you could put your contact information someplace, I would appreciate that.
You got it, David. I am doing that right now. And Susie, I think we are good to go to the next slide. Okay, so and thank you so much everyone again for participating, and feel free to still utilize that chat. We will absolutely reference back to it. So to understand the need, we need to acknowledge the root of the absence. And so when talking about the child welfare system specifically, we need to acknowledge that it was historically built on the foundation of supporting the safety, keyword safety, of younger children versus emerging young adults. So safety is a funny word because oftentimes when young people talk about risk and strategic risk and risk aversion, and this is something that we oftentimes talk about, there's usually people's hearts start racing and get sweaty because they get nervous about the liability, nervous about the risk, about the safety. And so as youth advocates, we absolutely keep safety as primary primary in what we do in all of our approaches. But again, going back to that historical construct, right, of children should be seen and not heard, there are societal dynamics that just have created a notion within all of our systems that we need to know better than young people. We need to do for young people, that young people don't have everything that they need in order to best represent themselves. And also talking about the orphan trains in the beginning, right? This was primarily around young children. You're talking about like 10 and under. So it makes sense that as a child welfare system as a whole is still getting to a place where they're absorbing and implementing best practice for transitional age young adults. The system was not necessarily designed for our 16 to 21-year-old population. It was really designed around the safety and security for our younger children. So now, as a system, we really have to challenge our thinking around inherent power, how we can utilize our privilege and access to share with young people so we can reimagine a better and more responsive system, because systems are not families. A system is a temporary pit stop within your life because of a challenge. So we really need to think very creatively around how young people can be viewed from cases and go to capital. That when we are working with a young person, they are viewed as an actual asset to the work that we do. And that doesn't require dollars. It requires a creative thinking capacity. We're good, Susie. So the developing leader, this goes right to Jasmine's point that she was just sharing before. Young adults in the child welfare system are often described among colleagues, among programs, by their past experiences or maybe by their current behaviors. So how many of us have been in the room and talked about a supportive housing option for a young person who maybe AWOLs or doesn't comply with programming, and do we withhold some of those services? Do we have fears or apprehensions of giving young people certain resources because we feel they're not ready or we feel that they're not demonstrating appropriate behaviors? But it's also just acknowledging the fact that young people do have to be in the driver's seat of their own lives. We are here for this pit stop. Right? This pit stop, this moment. Will we be sitting at the table when these young people are celebrating their holidays 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And the child welfare system, oftentimes, because it does so much for young people and not always with young people, there's an infantilization that happens where young people struggle to take on self-accountability and self-responsibility because they haven't had enough experience driving the car. And so when we think about that access to resources and appropriate behaviors and, what experiences should allow young people to access what services and what resources, young people that we're working with, the underlining question in every behavior and every experience is, who am I and where do I belong? That's not specific for young people in any system. That's human beings in general. A sense of belonging and a sense of self-identity is huge to being able to be an advocate as an adult, to feel confident as an adult, and to have overall emotional well-being as an adult. And so we have to ask ourselves as providers, as system stakeholders, are we doing a good enough job helping young people figure out who they are and where they belong? And those unhealed traumas that young people have experienced, and maybe even the overusage of labels, can lead to the development of false narratives. If a young person is hearing about their life and it's being authored by other individuals and not themselves, they don't have a sense of identity. They believe that they are the oppositional defiant child. They are the depressive child. They are the child with eating disorders. They are the non-compliant or the aggressive child. And we have to really make sure that we take a deep breath and we take some self-inventory and some self-awareness when we're having conversations with our colleagues, when we're writing our progress notes, when we're referring a young person. Would this narrative be a narrative that this young person would want shared about their life? We're good, Susie. And so very quickly, and I'm just going to go through some of these slides quickly because I see that we are running low on time and I want to give folks a chance to have some dialogue and some questions. But when we talk about working with young people, brain development is so huge when it comes to engaging a young person, and really just the concept of that it's not what's wrong with me, but it's what happened to me. And I'm not going to go through the brain science because I'm sure everybody in this room has experienced some trauma-informed or trauma healing training. But what I really want to invoke is the idea around what does it look like for us to give access to young people to have this knowledge themselves? Are they aware about neuroplasticity? Are they aware about the limbic system and the emotional state of mind and the executive state of thinking and the survival state? Now, we all know that. We've gone to trainings about that. But how good of a job are we doing with exposing young people to this knowledge? Because oftentimes when young people know more, they can do more. And we find that access to this information is not readily available to young people because there's a hyper focus on just goal management and behavior management. We're good, Susie. And so really quickly, I won't read through the whole thing, but I'll give a quick synopsis. You know, what does it look like when we share that knowledge with young people? So one of our programs that we have is called Bravery Beyond Bars, when we work with young people that are currently incarcerated in juvenile detention centers. And so I'm sure folks here are familiar with the ACEs study. And so the Bravehearts were as well. We were trained in this and we really found it to be very impactful. We had no idea about the physical conditioning of our body and our habits and patterns and how that connects to childhood trauma. And so what we did was we brought the ACEs study, the history of it, and the actual 10-point assessment into the jail. And we did this with young incarcerated men, young men of color at that. And we went through just the history of it, educating them about it, supporting them to take their own assessment, and then really supporting those really deep conversations of what their assessment revealed. And so initially when we did this, the administrators at the jail were very upset with the fact that we would have these conversations because they said, wait a minute, you're opening up Pandora's box. You know, young people should not be talking about this. And Bravehearts really pushed gently against that but with them. And we said, listen, we hear you, but these are young people's lives. How can we fear what they have already lived and survived? If we're not giving them access to ways to understand how their current behaviors and actions connect to their actual brain development and behaviors, you know, what are we doing? And they were really able to kind of see our perspective and they were supportive of the conversation. And to date, that's been one of our most impactful activity sessions that we've done. Go ahead, Susie. Sorry. Thank you. So how can we level up? You know, how can we build in partnerships, right? That example that I gave about the jail, that took a courageous conversation. I could have made them very upset. I could have lost our contract. You know, they could have said, no, you're not doing that. But it's that communication that leads to that partnership. And so there's various levels of partnership. And so you look at case level partnership and you want to ask yourself, how can youth be seen as partners in their own case plan? Going back to that driving in the car, how are they able to get where they need to go? How are we teaching them to take ownership over their own life? Then there's that peer level partnership. How can we support the well-being of other system impacted youth? So now we're creating a partnership where youth are able to connect with other youth. So to Jasmine's point, she talked about Bravehearts being a space where she got emotional wellness. That's because of her connection with other young people in a safe space. And then there's system level partnerships. So how can system stakeholders use their influence of youth voice to really create system reform? And these are questions we want to ask ourselves. Susie, we can go ahead. You know, one of the distinctions between youth engagement and involvement is the level in which young people are participating. So you want to ask yourself when you're putting together any type of youth convening, was it the youth's idea to even participate? How much input did they have in the way in which they are participating? And are they being supported to develop and pursue their own ideas? So maybe the initiative had its own plan and its own strategy coming in, but now you have youth voice at the table and the young people want to go in a different direction. What's your tolerance and your capacity to be flexible and go in a different direction? Susie, we're good? So some of those internal struggles, when we get to a place like, oh, you know, I wanted this to go one way, now they're going to go another way, you know, where does that it's very normal. It's very normal because we're talking about these inherent practices of like adult versus youth. And then we're talking about the challenges of sharing power. And if that was easier, this world would be a better place. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us. And so you know, sometimes we have those internal thoughts where we're asking ourselves on one side, you know, working with youth requires me to take on creative risk taking. That's exciting, right? But then maybe there's that counter thought where it's like, if I give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. You know how young people are. And, you know, like maybe the idea of like, I should adapt my supervision techniques to be more responsive to my youth staff. And then there's that other thought, that counter thought, where it's like, you know what, young people need to learn to live in the real world. So they're just going to have to take it how I give it. And, you know, maybe there's the thought of that we should have more youth-led programming. Of course, you know, working with youth is fun. It's exciting. It's definitely funny. But then maybe there's that counter thought where it's like, you know what, I don't even get paid enough to deal with this craziness and chaos. And so we really wanted to kind of put this real slide out here because we know that it's very normative to have these conflicting thoughts, especially when working or operating within an agency or system that is very new to the inclusion of youth voice. Susie, we can go to the next slide. So very quickly, because we're not going to have enough time to go over this, but this is Roger Hart's ladder of youth involvement. You can feel free to Google that, and there's printable attachments of this if anybody wants to utilize it with any discussions. But this is a great tool to really assess as a program or agency what your level of participation looks like with youth partners. And there's everything from manipulation to child initiated and shared decisions with adults. And there's pros and cons to each rung of the ladder. And it's also nonlinear. Agencies, depending on leadership or funding, can go up and down the ladder. Next slide, please. So Susie, I'm just going to have you go to the next slide because we probably have to wrap up in like 5 minutes. Yes, and then we can, we'll start with this one. So practicing justice as an adult ally, right? If we're talking about the partnership with young people, how can we leverage our experiences and our role to best support young people? Next slide. So an adult ally is an individual who is defined as a support for youth and taking on a reciprocal and oftentimes long-term relationship with a young person, helping them with professional connectedness, building a sense of mutuality. Some of those characteristics of an adult ally, someone who really champions youth, someone who's humble, humorous, optimistic, creative. You talked about risk-taking, right? Got to be able to take on some creative risk-taking. Someone who's patient. This is a big one. Definitely need to be patient. Passionate and self-aware. The self-awareness is huge as well because, you know, frustrations and challenges will arise, and you want to be able to be readily self-aware in the moment and be prepared to shift as needed. Next slide, please. And some of the benefits for having allied relationships. So for young people, the benefits are you're redefining stigmatized adult relationships. You're essentially rewiring how young people trust. For administrators, the benefits of an allied relationship is a renewed commitment and energy for the program. There's just the ability to say, you know what, I've been doing this work for 10 years and now I'm working with young people and I feel a little bit more excitement with the role. This is, you know, this is a new exciting program I want to take on. And then for systems, the benefits of an allied relationship are the ability to create more responsive, effective, and equitable programs, you know, because if you are allied, the system is listening, there should be a shift and there should be responsiveness into the way that systems are practiced, supported by young people for young people. We'll move on. We're going to move on again. So this one, I wanted to give some credit to this slide as well too. So when we talk about practicing justice, we have to talk about equity, equality, and justice. Language matters, and oftentimes some of these terms can be utilized in different spaces and places. But if we want to be intentional, we want to know what these things mean and what it looks like with working with young people to help them with their own goals. So status quo is just the norm, which unfortunately is the inequity. Our system and our society is inequitable, and there's a lack of justice. And so you'll see in the image that there is just a fence. Folks cannot see. There is no fairness. There is no responsiveness. But then if we look at equality, and let's look at this for fun, let's look at this as an example. With youth homelessness. So I'm sure most folks in the room have dealt with youth housing crisis or youth homelessness challenges. So if we're looking at the concept of youth homelessness through an equitable lens, that's the thought process that everyone needs the same amount of resource. So it's the idea that everyone should be equal. So everybody should get an opportunity to apply for supportive housing. That would be an equitable thought process around youth housing and youth homelessness. But if you're looking at bringing equity into the youth housing challenge, then you're looking at distributing resources in a fair way. And that's being responsive. You're saying, okay, I see that Tom has this, but Jane needs this. So we're going to put this in place for Jane, and we're going to make sure that it doesn't take away from Tom. So you're able to really view everyone as an individual versus lumping everyone together. And then if we're looking at justice and what justice looks like for youth housing and youth homelessness, that's just eliminating the challenge altogether. That would look like us as a society saying that housing is a right, and all young people should be afforded the opportunity to be safely and securely housed and supported. And we're just eliminating the barrier altogether. At Bravehearts, we really strive to achieve justice. But as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, it is very difficult, and it takes a collaborative effort and a lot of patience, because unfortunately, there's a lot of pitfalls on the way to justice. Susie, I see that we have 5 minutes left. And I know we're not going to get through the rest of our slides. Could we possibly go to the end where we have, yeah. Yep. And so we actually just, while we're going through this and getting to the end, we provide these technical assistance trainings. They're not an hour and a half. They go for 4 hours or more. And we do this with agencies all the time. We actually help them with hiring and employment practices for retaining youth advocates. We tackle courageous conversations around staff and youth engagement and some of the challenges that we see that happen all too often that really get in the way of progress. So I apologize immensely for not being able to give time and space to all of the slides here, but I also want to let folks know in the room that if you're interested in having the full version of this training and this courageous conversation, the Bravehearts are absolutely available to do that. And we really like to build Braveheart leaders in other communities. So, you know, we have a Bravehearts in Manhattan, the Bronx, Westchester, Rockland, Orange, and Dutchess counties. The goal is to build those Bravehearts up, and real leaders build leadership in others. There's Bravehearts all over the world. It's just about adults giving space for young people to share in that power and have a place where they can find themselves. If you met me when I was in foster care, I would have never appeared as a leader. I never spoke with my head up. David said I had a nice speaking voice. I was like taken aback because I'm very self-conscious of the way I speak even to this day. And it takes adults to believe in me in order for me to have believed in myself. So everyone in this room absolutely has a responsibility to really just engage very creatively with young people, because our leaders of today are in front of us, but sometimes it takes a little creative effort to get that young person to see that they're a leader and shift their thinking. We have a couple of minutes left, and I would love to open it up to folks that want to ask some last minute questions or give some comments. I see that we're getting some really good feedback in the chat. Thank you so much for that. I'm so sorry that we were not able to get through everything, but I'd love to take these next 3 minutes and open it up to the room for some questions and thoughts.
Hey there, I'm Melanie. I'm from Ulster County. How are you doing?
Hi, Melanie. Thank you so much for sharing in the chat.
Yes, absolutely. And I have dogs barking, all kinds of craziness in the background, so excuse whatever happens. But one of my questions is, I think the government is still doing far too little to integrate youth voice, and there's so much more participatory systems that need to happen. I do see more and more nonprofits trying to do better work. And sometimes the tension I see there is that it comes in the form of putting far too much on youth and far too much responsibility on youth, and not giving them ample support and then labeling it youth voice, or giving them far too many kind of like choices. So the reality is we all have limited resources at a certain level. So, you know, most of us can't say, yes, we can do absolutely anything you want ever. So, you know, the way that I work with that tension is I usually present, you know, a limited number of choices that we can do well, and then ask youth to kind of weigh in, et cetera, that sort of thing. But I'm wondering if that's a tension that others see, and how are you dealing with that tension, and how can we make sure that we are appropriately integrating youth voice in a supportive way that's not going to feel overwhelming to young people?
Oh, Melanie, such an awesome statement and question. I don't know if I'm going to give it the respect that it deserves in 60 seconds, but I will try. Yes, we absolutely do address that. And yes, you are spot on. I've experienced that myself developing. I find that it took me a long time to get out of a space where I felt pitied for my story. And that's why I really just love the idea of going from the youth advocate to advocate for youth to the young professional, because I am more than my story. It's just a piece of me. And so I think sometimes these things happen. They're well intended, but it's because we struggle with the concept around thinking that power sharing means equal expectation, and it doesn't. You know, we need to understand that as adults in the room, there are privileges that you have in regards to a salary, maybe family, a home, you know, children, safety. And so those are things that young people do not have. So when we preach this shared power, folks are like, well, why can't a young person clock in at 9 o'clock in the morning? You said shared power. Why is it wrong to expect that from a young person? Well, you have to consider that young people maybe are taking medication at night and they struggle to wake up in the morning. We need to consider that a lot of our youth advocates are young parents and are dropping their children off at childcare or are struggling to find childcare. And so all of these different challenges that we see, that individuals like yourself and others who are like, no, I need to be responsive and I need to make sure that I'm really I'm practicing justice as an ally. I don't want to tokenize young people. I don't want to just only tap into them for their story. And I'm willing to be patient to develop the young person as a person versus a professional. Like even for my supervision, my supervisor knows he never does supervision with me without a box of tissues and food in the room, because I'm definitely crying and I'm definitely eating. And so he takes the time to really sit with my personal stuff, and before we even get to the professional stuff, because there are still real challenges I am going through, because we don't age out of our trauma. We do better at managing it, but holidays are hard, you know. It comes and it goes. So I think just in a nutshell, I would love to continue to have the conversation with you. But in a nutshell, I think the best thing we can do is just be very self-aware and also communicative. Like ask young people, are we doing a good job? Like, does this make sense? Is this what you need? And that's, I think, where we get uncomfortable, because it's like, why would a young person tell me how to do my job? They're not. And that's not what we're asking. We're just asking you to think outside of the box with how you work with young people. And oftentimes we provide that work in what we're used to as working with youth clients, but these are not youth clients. Now these are young professionals that we are supporting. So yes, absolutely. And we could go off on a tangent too around like the needs of the federal government and just really providing the dollars to communities to provide a livable wage to youth advocates. You know, Braveheart's one of our pitfalls is we have positions for youth, but they're 10 hours a week, 12 hours a week, 7 hours a week. How can I expect or ask young people to give of their experience and themselves when I can't even pay them a livable wage? And that I call on the state and federal government to really provide more funding to communities for these essential roles. Thank you so much for asking that. Jasmine, did you want to share anything before we close out? And I know we're 3 minutes over, and I really apologize for keeping folks over time. But Jasmine, I would be remiss if I did not ask you to close us out.
I think this presentation was very beautiful. This was my actually, just to keep it quick, because I'm trying to be quick, but this was actually my first presentation speaking, but this is my second presentation that I've been to. And it was very great. I'm glad that I hope that I've, you know, how do I say it? In a way, spoke my, you know, spoke who I am and, you know, what I want to do with everybody, you know, with the change, making a change and things like that. And, you know, we started off slow, you know, and we were working our way up. But I'm very happy that I've experienced this. You know, yeah, it's very beautiful.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. And I think this is going to be the first of many presentations for you. And I can't wait to get you in a physical space and outside of these computer screens. Susie, I also want to thank you so much for bearing with our technical challenges and really just supporting us through this presentation today. And again, I can put my information in the chat, but we would love to be able to support any of your agencies, especially if you're an agency that we're already providing services in. If you're in one of those counties we have mentioned, you know, we'd love to be able to support you as well. And thank you so much for that. I know folks have, I think, other workshops to go to. If any, I'm going to stay on the call. So if anybody that wants to stay on with me, absolutely can. But for folks that need to leave, I absolutely understand. And I'm speaking on the panel tomorrow. And so hopefully, if any folks would like to ask any questions or connect as well, we can do that there.
And I want to say thank you so much to both Jasmine and Jessica for the presentation and challenging us to authentically engage youth voice in our programming and to really look for that sweet spot in our partnerships. I put a couple of links in the chat, which are the evaluation for this program, as well as if you need to get a CTLE for this program as well. I want to remind you about tomorrow's program, beginning of the day with a panel discussion, as Jessica just mentioned. And following that, we have a couple of afternoon workshops. So I hope that you all can attend or you have registered. There's still time to register. And it was such a wonderful workshop. Thank you, Jasmine and Jessica, not only for being with us here for today, but for all that you do as well.
You are very welcome. It was a pleasure meeting you. I hope to see you soon in the very next future.
Same. I do hope we keep in touch. I'm excited to learn of your programs.
Yes.
And I'm call tomorrow with youth.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
You mentioned a call tomorrow with the youth. Is that in that schedule or is that a